We run our entire company with Zoho, from accounting to HR, loss prevention, document management, everything, pretty much.
We're a tugboat company, and we have about 65 tugboats that are entering their daily traffic within Zoho Creator, and that's how we're using that, and I've been very happy with it. It's an excellent product.
So today we have with us Dr. Learty, the principal consultant and owner of Right Research LLC. He's an academician, researcher, and an accomplished professional in the education industry. Hi, how are you doing today?
I am wonderful. Thank you for asking.
So briefly tell us about Right Research and what is it that you do?
So Right Research, we focus on all things that, and I shouldn't say all things, but mostly all things related to educational research, assessment, and planning, specifically those things around academic planning, helping schools and nonprofit organizations who service educational programs maintain and manage outcomes, data, performance, and continuous improvement. So a lot of the work we do is around continuous improvement, developing outcomes, and helping folks kind of develop continuous improvement practices and working through academic plans, strategic plan, and school plans. So anything related to the data, the assessment, the planning, and continuous improvement. So I'll just kind of leave it as the umbrella of educational research, planning, and continuous improvement.
So with online classes and in some cases where schools have reopened, both kids and parents have faced difficulties during the pandemic. So do you think institutions or educationists could have handled this better?
I don't think necessarily so. I think people with the pandemic being the way it is and the numbers being different depending on where you are, I think people are addressing it in terms of schools, that is. Schools are addressing it the best way they know how, because what works in one circumstance may not work in the other circumstance. For example, rural schools may be less populated and may not have the staff or the faculty or staff to make certain provisions, whereas some of the larger schools might be able to handle that a different way. As far as space makes a difference. So having the ability to rotate students in line, or even my own kids, their schools are large enough where they can allow social distancing and they can expand the lunchtime to allow seats to be skipped and different precautionary measures like that. So it really just depends on where you're located, the size, and the dynamics. They just differ from one place to the other. So I think people are trying to handle it the best way they can based on their dynamics.
So since you're an academician as well as enthusiastic about tech, how do you think low-code technology can help the education industry?
I think technology is I don't know where to start with that one. I would say it's a necessity now because of the need to be able to assess things. And I think to the previous question, the pandemic has shown that the need to have data readily available, to be able to have information readily available, and to be able to do a lot of automation, I think it's necessary now. Because we work in different locations, because we deal with different types of students, because of the resources and the integration of technology into our everyday lives in education, we have to be able to use the technology. And more so, what I have found, or what kind of drives me, is adding some automation to those processes. So the day-to-day operations are taxing enough. So to be able to add some types of efficiencies to those processes, that's what I think is extremely important. And just to have access to information that you need readily.
So specifically for you, was adopting low-code technology difficult?
It wasn't. For me, because I've worked in data, in accreditation, and assessment, in my full-time roles, I've worked in institutional research and institutional effectiveness. So dealing with data on a regular basis is something that's normal for me.
But since you're not from a tech background, did you ever get overwhelmed with, low code tech?
I think there may have been times where I tried to figure out certain things with low code, but I will say with Zoho, the resources have been extremely helpful. One thing that I appreciate is the chat and being able to get a live person so that if there is a struggle, if I run into something, I can easily chat it in the box and I get a response. Even after hours, and I'll be guilty, I've been on my laptop late at night, even after hours, if I put something in the chat, it sends an email and the ticket, I get a response by the next morning. So I've not had a lot of issues. I think some of the ebooks that are available via download, and I have the, I'm looking across my bar right now because I have on my shortcuts a guide to the Deluge guide. And so I think the resources have been pretty good.
So, what is the business need for you to adopt low code?
The need for me to be able to do low code was because, as I mentioned, working with the different schools, be able to access things really easily and rather quickly. And I'll take for a prime example, one of the schools that we work with, and they don't mind me mentioning, was St. Benedict's Episcopal School. So they're an independent school, and because of their small size, and I won't say small, they have 494 students, but because of their small size for staff and faculty, they need to be able to turn things over rather quickly. So they had developed a set of assessments for their students, and they wanted to be able to capture those data and put those in a way that they can build a dashboard and to access that information. So we started working with them in the spring, and they had the 2 years of prior data for learning assessments, and they were getting ready to capture another set. So they wanted to have longitudinal data sets over the last 3 years. So we needed to be able to go in and build a dashboard and build forms for them to record those learning assessments rather quickly. So the need to be able to adopt something that was low code was easier for us due to the time that we could turn it around.
So, since you're talking about data, can you tell me some of the data that you have to replicate?
So we have to replicate. So there are a set of student entry scores that we had to be able to upload the student scores. There are a set of learning outcomes that we needed to be able to upload, and it needed to be in a relational database. So, and if I can park for there just a moment, a lot of schools, and Google is a great suite. It's wonderful for G Suite for Education, and many of the schools that we work with use G Suite for Education. But the difference is a lot of them will start to use Google Forms, and the forms are great for capturing information, but it's not relational. So the information just sits there in a Google sheet, and an Excel sheet and a Google sheet is not a database. So you have to keep copying, pasting, keep entering in the information, versus a relational database. You can just fetch and easily automate capturing those processes. So of the 494 students, instead of having to keep re-entering that data, once we put the student profiles in there, they were able just to select the student. It fetches the student's profile information, the learning assessment, the CTP scores, the learning outcomes for each of the grade levels were all able to be easily attached to that student. So they didn't have to create a Google form for each one and enter the information again for each one. So that's where some of those, and I hope I answered your question, that's where some of those kind of tasks to help automate and ease their day-to-day processes. So Zoho Creator was excellent for that because, again, Google works great, and I like the fact that it integrates. And that was one of the positives about Zoho is that because they're G Suite, when they got ready to upload, they could easily click on the little cloud button since Zoho integrates with Google and go to their Google Drive and batch upload some of those things. And they recognize, wait a minute, it's better to use a relational database than a Google form because we have these large data sets, and we need to be able to connect these pieces, which of course we know is a fetch, a fetch script, but they need to be able to connect these different pieces to every student. And so that's how we were able to add some efficiencies and help them create these dashboards for all of these different scores and outcomes for their students.
So before using Zoho Creator, did you use any other tools?
I didn't use any other tools in terms of a relational database and low-code app development. I too am guilty that just to try to create some efficiencies, we would use Google Forms because a lot of folks were just entering in things, spreadsheets all the time, and you had literally a school that I'm working with now, and I don't know if they mind me saying this, we're doing the same process with them, and that's South Carolina's governor school. So this is a state charter school for the entire state. It's a very selective school, and they have a need because of the types of information that are captured. They have a need for a relational database. So we're in the process of working with them to set that up so that they have the information that they need. And they were using Survey Monkeys to add efficiencies. But again, a survey tool is for a survey. So capturing registration information, learning outcomes, and other information that's relational, where you'll continuously have to connect one piece of data to the other piece of data. You can't do that from what we consider a static tool, like a spreadsheet or survey tool, because that information is static. You have to keep re-entering it in, whereas using a relational database such as what we're building on Zoho Creator, it allows them to say, okay, here's this piece of data, here's this piece of data, here's this piece of data. We can relate it and make it talk to each other. And that's essentially what they needed. In order to try to do that, they had, over the past 3 years, 354 surveys with, of course, sheets attached to that they were exporting. And we came in and said, well, you could eliminate literally about 75% of those just by some of those pieces that you continuously use over and over again, making those in a relational database by showing the relationships in a low-code builder. So we, are using Zoho for that.
So tell us something about the Ed Insights platform and the various modules that it has.
Okay, so of the two examples that I have given, we've worked with we worked with a nonprofit agency in Alabama, Anniston Community Education Foundation. That's part of they have a grant working with Anniston City Schools. We've worked with Georgia Independent School Association, as well as St. Benedict's is an independent school, and we've worked with the state of South Carolina for their governor schools twice. And what we noticed each time that we work, kind of that common theme that I mentioned across the board, was as we're working on their continuous improvement and helping them manage their outcomes and their data and being able to access information for their continuous improvement planning, whether it was school planning, strategic planning, accreditation preparation, programmatic accreditation, all of those different things where outcomes and data go into some type of form of assessment and planning. What we recognized is that we kept doing the same things over and over and over again in terms of creating a way for them to capture outcomes, whether it's learning outcomes, accreditation standards, or other types of standards around learning and school performance. We kept noticing faculty credentials. We kept noticing the need for dashboard and data analytics. And so a light bulb finally went on, and we said, why don't we develop a application where this can be done easily? There are standard things that are across the board where we always know outcomes are going to be captured. We always know the analytics needs to be formed to see how programs are performing using these types of data. We also know that understanding how student performance needs to happen is always going to be a case. Understanding that accreditation prep and managing outcomes is always going to be a need. And being able to connect outcomes across all of these things are going to be part of the school planning process. So when we found Zoho Creator and the ability to build an app and the ability to be able to market an app on Zoho Marketplace, we said, okay, let's take advantage of this. Let's capitalize on this. This is a reoccurring thing where all of these schools and all these clients that we've worked with have to use these types of processes. So why don't we take all these processes and put them in an application so that they're readily available? So that's how we ended up developing the Education Insights. And in a sense, it is a continuous improvement platform that gives you the ability to house all of these types of outcomes, from classroom observations to entering in different types of assessments, to creating dashboards to measure these types of assessments, to running the analytics needs for state accountability reports, accreditation reports. And you can now have the ability to do that in a centralized place in a relational database instead of 354 spreadsheets.
Wow, Ed Insights seems so did you build the Ed Insights platform on your own?
I did. So again, with my background, having worked in various institutions and having used either continuous improvement platforms, strategic planning platforms, or assessment management platforms, I've had the opportunity from a user end, and that's what's so great about Zoho. It allowed me to build it from a user standpoint. So I'm not just doing this as a developer, I'm actually an educator and a user who's had to use these several types of platforms to prepare accreditation reports, to prepare learning outcome measures. So as an educator and as an end user, that's where I think that it was exciting to me to be able to say, hey, I'm not just a developer saying, here is how I think it should work. I'm also an end user who has used these platforms to say, here's how it should work because I have used it this way. I continue to have to use it this way. I've used Campus Lab. I've used TaskStream by Watermark. I've used Weaved Education, played with that a little bit. I've seen APHIS and all of these other platforms. I've played inside of Infinite Campus and Performance Matters for that PowerSchool makes. And it's not meant to be a student information system. It's meant to be a continuous improvement and assessment platform. So I want to make that distinction because that's where the gap is having those things around those improvement areas and continuous improvement and assessment areas where a lot of people need the help. And so having used some of those platforms, and they come with a huge ticket. In fact, a lot of people aren't familiar with your continuous improvement and assessment management platforms simply because they don't necessarily market across the board. And if you are not in institutional research, institutional effectiveness, or assessment and accountability, you may not know that they exist because those are the primary areas of education that utilize such platforms. So you have another group that they need the resources, but because their institutional school may not have that office, they may not be familiar with it. And if they are familiar with it, you're talking about a hefty price tag at the enterprise level that can cost tens of thousands of dollars just to be able to use such a platform. So because I know that, hey, there are people who may not have those resources or be aware, that's another reason why I wanted to create the platform to give them some of those efficiencies and automation that's needed.
So do schools actually prioritize the platform over anything else?
Some schools aren't even familiar that such platforms exist. And so unless you've worked in those three specific offices, again, institutional research, institutional effectiveness, or an assessment and accountability office, you may not even know that some of those things exist. And so it's about doing some dissemination and some education about having these tools available and these resources available. And again, the second part of that, if I do know they exist, I can't afford them because of the hefty price tag that comes with them.
At present, how many users access the application?
So as of right now, there are technically 4. So we're kind of in the infancy stage. So we've just become a Zoho partner. We just finished that over the past few weeks. And so this is actually happening at the beginning of our launch. So this is a great opportunity to be able to share the message about it, because we're at the launch phase. We're going through, we received conditional approval. We have to make some more modifications. We're going through the approval process, and we have 4 schools that are piloting right now. So we have, and I'm sorry, I take that back. We have 3 schools and a nonprofit education agency that's piloting it right now, because not only is it useful for schools, a lot of the nonprofit educational agencies that help support educational programs, in order to keep their funding for their grants, in order to keep partnerships and people donating, they have to show how their programs are working and how it's benefiting educational programs and educational services. So they need the data, they need to capture the information to show this in their reports in order to keep their productivity up and in order to keep their grants and their funding. So the nonprofit education agency that's using the app right now is the Anderson Community Education Foundation in Alabama, and they're a grant nonprofit agency that helps support Anderson City schools for their STEM programs. We have a Georgia independent school that's working on it as well, and a charter school in Atlanta, Delta STEAM Academy. They are using it as part of their pilot. St. Benedict's Episcopal School in Atlanta, which is part of the Georgia Independent School Association. And I want to, again, distinguish Delta STEAM Academy is part of Georgia Charter Schools, whereas St. Benedict's is part of Georgia Independent Schools, 2 different bodies there. And now we are placing South Carolina Governor Schools for Science and Mathematics on it. So we have 4 pilots right now, which is pretty exciting for us to be in our infancy stage and have 4, 3 schools and 1 nonprofit agency on it.
So have you created any other applications with Zoho Creator?
But as far as actual apps that I have created, they have all been around the Ed Insights and just building it and improving it and adding these efficiencies. It's actually a rather robust application. There are 6 modules embedded within the application itself, and each of those modules are rather robust. So it is not a small an application. In fact, when I went through the approval process with Zoho, with Marketplace, because of the size of the DS file, I had to upload it through the Workplace Drive so that the team could review it for approval. So it is a rather robust, large application.
What do the modules do?
So in the 6 modules, and I'm not going to share my screen at the moment. So in the 6 modules, there's 1 module. This is the largest module for planning and effectiveness. And what this module allows for educators and folks in assessment to do is to create rubrics. And in education, you need the ability to create rubrics so that you can rate and assess your performance. They can also input and house different types of outcomes and standards that they want to use throughout various types of reports. So in education, we always use this data-informed or data-driven decision-making, and we want to know how programs and learnings and our school effectiveness plans, how we're doing with these things. So we need to be able to measure these different standards and outcomes across the board. So it allows for users to input a standard or criteria, and then when they're writing the report, they can fetch that same standard without all the copying and pasting and generate reports. And they can add ratings and how well they're doing or levels of effectiveness to those, and moderately effective, very effective, and they can enumerate those and see how well they're doing inside of the dashboard. We have 4 programs that are rated at very effective, and this is how we're performing. They can print out that data and take the PDF with the ability inside of Zoho Creator and add those to the reports. They can develop improvement and accountability standards, and they can categorize these by taking the different categorizations inside of the reports and manage those. One of the things that the schools have found extremely effective in the planning and effectiveness model is that it generates, I use the print templates to create the report. So once you enter in the information in the form, the print template generates the written report for you. So no longer do you have to go and copy and paste from one sheet or Word document to the next. And so that's a really good feature to help automate the report and effectiveness writing that goes into the whole planning and report. Another module that we have is the observations and evaluations. So because of the mobile feature, we have observation forms built into the app where if it is a performance observation, a classroom observation, a teacher observation, you can actually select and fill out that information. And unlike a Google form, because it's not static, you can relate that back to the teacher and you can track his or her performance over the year for each outcome and each observation. So in that whole observation and evaluation module, there are several types of observations and several types of evaluations, including programs and student intervention evaluations that you have in there. In another module, we have faculty credentialing. So professional development is a huge area in education where for each year, faculty and staff are required to do so many activities. And oftentimes keeping track of that is pretty hard. So it gives them a place where I can go and update my faculty credentials. I presented at this conference. I, attended this professional learning activity, and it allows for them to keep track of that and monitor that in a dashboard as well that goes along with those forms in the faculty credentialing and professional development module. Then we have a personalized learning and assessment. So creating unique learning plans, which in there's a form for personalized learning where you can develop separate types of learning goals, and you can fetch the student information into that and track how that student is doing with that personalized learning goal that you've set up for them. As well as there's a program module for tracking those co-curricular and extracurricular activities. So oftentimes we'll take the independent schools, they have several programs and student initiatives that they have running at any given time during the academic year. And what they'd like to know is, hey, we created this writing program. How are students doing? So they now have the ability to enter in students into that program and say, hey, here are the goals of this program. And similar to the planning module and the evaluation module, they can see how students are performing and track observations and performance of the program across that academic year, and keep that longitudinal data for up to 5 years in that dashboard. And it gives them the ability to track that performance. And then we also have the 6th module is just the student information module, just to be able to organize your student information. What's really good about this is that it's integrated. I have the data fields and the batch upload instructions embedded in there using the note fields from Zoho, where you don't have to enter in all your student information. You can use your student information system like your Infinite Campus, your Power School, your Banner, your Workday, and batch upload your records. In fact, the Georgia Independent School that we're working with, they use a student information system called RenWeb and FACS. And in order to use the other 5 modules, they just upload their student information there by importing their data table, and it automatically links to the other 5 modules. So no longer, again, it gets away from that copy and pasting and re-entering in information. Now the other 5 modules are related to that one module, and it can fetch all of their student basic information like name and ID and attach it to anything related to assessment and outcomes that goes into their continuous improvement. We set up the faculty credentialing the same way. They can import that one data table in the faculty credentialing, and now you can use the other modules to create and tie faculty into the observations, into the reports, and into all of those other components.
So not just for the students, it's for faculty as well.
Yes, yeah. In education, everything's about the outcomes and what those desired outcomes are. So you might have some that they want to track how the school is performing, how the student is performing, how faculty are performing, how staff are performing. And so those list of outcomes, you want to be able to tie those into those particular groups or population and get the analytics of that, because that's what goes into the reports and into the written reports for accreditation, for state reports, for accountability. Those are the types of things that go into that.
So will the schools be able to customize, the platform based on their needs?
A great thing about Zoho Creator is that you can go back in and add forms and fields to help the customization, which is another thing, is because, again, no one school might be alike. So the goal was to create a platform with some standardization so that it is helpful and automated for all users. But again, you can always go back and add some additional customized features that are unique to your particular school or your particular processes for planning and assessment.
So what are the benefits that the EdInsight platform can give, schools and institutions?
Time. Time is one big benefit. Again, the example that I gave where they were combing through 354 spreadsheets and thinking about data cleansing and the amount of time that that takes to organize information, it is a huge time saver. Another way of saving time is being able to readily use the mobile web access features, being able to just capture information. If I'm walking and I need to do an observation or need to do an evaluation, it saves time that way. The other thing is just being able to relate information without re-entering and copying and pasting over and over again. So when I say time, I can just go on and on and on naming how it saves time. The other thing with the time is the reason it saves time is because of the automation. So not having to spin your wheels doing things over and over again, the automation helps with that. Again, having taught, having been an educational leader, and now having been an evaluator, working with different schools, the day-to-day operations is enough. It's very taxing enough as it is. So the automation is a big benefit. And then resources are thin right about now. With budget cuts and the pandemic and certain things affecting, you don't always necessarily have the resources to go out and purchase more software. And this is a big benefit because of the cost savings that comes along with using a low-cost platform such as Zoho Creator, and using our app built on that platform. It helps reduce costs for schools and institutions to be able to use, and organizations, your nonprofits, to be able to use a low-cost solution to help them manage all of these multiple pieces that are up in the air at any given time. And the other part of the benefit, which I cannot express enough being a data professional, is the securities. Meeting the ISO Type 1, ISO Type 2, the data governance, the GDPR, all of the privacy, the securities, and the protection that comes with Zoho as an integrated development environment is a huge thing, especially with cybersecurity and all of the things that we face using data and having it cloud-based. Again, I can just go on and on about the multiple benefits, but these are four of the huge benefits: the cost savings, the automation, the time, and the securities. I think those are four overwhelming things that are very beneficial.
Since there are 4 pilots already, have you received any feedback from them, like on how they feel about EdInsight?
I have received quite a bit of feedback from those folks that are using it. It's actually all been positive, and it's been very helpful. I will tell you that the 2 of the modules grew from adding the last school on it, because we recognized that there were certain things like, oh my God, you can do this. If you can do this, can we relate this? So I'll take the Georgia Independent Schools with St. Benedict's. They came back once they figured out, oh, you can do observations and evaluations. So what if we add additional performance measures for teachers? Could we relate it the same way? So if we wanted to create a performance, a faculty performance measure, or a faculty performance form internally, could we do that? And I'm like, you know what? That's part of credentialing, and it uses the same information for that. So that was great feedback. So we modified and created a performance section of the faculty credentialing based on getting that feedback.
So you were able to customize it.
We were, and we made that right before we modified that. We were in the process of going through the Zoho Marketplace approval. So we were able to integrate that into one of the features now. So that's going to be included in the Ed Insights app because we just decided, you know what, that's going to be a common thing that's going to be, we probably will hear that across the board over and over again. So why don't we go ahead and what was customized, add that in there. And that also makes it unique to some of the other comparative models in those platforms that I was speaking about earlier, because this is what's going to make this unique, is that you will have this as a readily available feature. And again, only available through Zoho and Marketplace, because Zoho allows that customized ability to do that.
Since you built Ed Insights on your own, how long did it take for you to implement or deploy the application?
I would say because of the size of the application and because of the 6 modules that are included in it, it took me about, I want to say from just the basic development of it, about a year. But that's because I wanted to test it, and because there are 6 huge modules, and each module took anywhere from about 3 months to build. But I will say, to do the refining of it, after testing it and getting some of the feedback, it was very easy. The feedback that I got, and to go in and refine it once it was built, the customization for each module, I can go in very short period of time. Maybe if you tell me something that you wanted to customize, have it done in a couple of days or a week's time. And that's the good thing about it, is that it's the initial setup. You put the work in up front for the initial setup, but to go back and to build an additional piece to it or relate additional piece, it's very easy to do that.
So what are the features that you
So what are some of the features that I really liked about being able to do that I enjoy? I enjoy the fact that the lookup fields, and because of the need for our particular use to be able to do all of the relational database, the lookup fields are absolutely amazing for that. Because all I have to do to make it automatically map to another set of information is to simply insert a lookup field. And when I insert the lookup field, it automatically knows to map all of that information. It's going to fetch that information with it. The workflows are pretty simple and straightforward. And then some of the preloaded functions, such as the filters that come with the lookup fields, and some of the assisted coding syntax that's in the workflow builder, where you assign functions. Those are just absolutely amazing, because they cut down time for me as a developer to be able to make all of these complex relationships to make this great automation. So because, again, I'm developing this from an end user standpoint, having been on the other side, I know what needs to happen to make the automation. And so Zoho makes that easier for me as a developer now to make those automated connections by using the functions and the workflows and the lookup fields to make that relationship that I know needs to happen. So I really enjoy those features. I'm an avid user, and I'm a big proponent of it. So I could go on talking about some of the features. I love the ability of the vibrant colors. I love the ease of the user interface, because I think that's one of the things. I've seen some very clunky systems, and to be able to customize an interface and be able to do that, I just find that to be very useful, especially to create vibrant colors and the analytics, the BI tools. That's another thing. So I'm also, in addition to some of those assessment platforms, oftentimes I'll have to build and this is outside of my role as in Right Research as a consultant, I'll use Tableau or Microsoft BI or some of the other business information tools, business intelligence tools to make these analytics. But the fact that it comes with Zoho Analytics embedded with the data, embedded with the forms, with the ability to export all in one, that's just hands down a plus.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Not that I can think of at the moment. I'd love for folks to reach out to me at any point in time and ask me questions. I'd love to share feedback. I'm an avid proponent of Zoho Creator, so I'd be more than happy to always share my insights. And that's when I was interested in becoming, when I saw that it was available for developers to become a partner and to go to the marketplace based on what I saw as a developer. And again, having that as an end user, I'm like, yeah, I'm there. Okay. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about Zoho Creator and its amazing, powerful use and how it's actually helping me. This is actually helping me launch this application and grow my business as well, helping folks with continuous improvement and educational assessment and data and information. So this is truly a great opportunity. So I'm glad and thank you for having me to be able to speak about it and share my story and share what a great experience it has been.